forum with our 3 police chief candidates. I'm John Reese, city manager here in Eugene, and really appreciate you spending part of your evening with us, helping us to evaluate and provide some feedback on 3 candidates for our next police chief. As you know, this is an extremely important part of our community, a position in our community, and what we've really wanted to do is open this up for everybody to have an opportunity to hear and then provide us some feedback. And you'll learn later on more specifically how you're able to do that. This is also being live streamed, and so anybody in the community that wants to tune into it can, and we're hoping that a lot of people are doing that as well. Your moderators tonight are Sarah Maderi, who's our Public Works Director and has lived in Eugene for over 25 years, and Phil Carrasco, who is a community member, former Human Rights Commission member, and has been in our community over 15 years, and so they have quite a bit of experience with us. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to the 2 of you.
Thank you, John. So we're excited to moderate this important forum tonight, everybody. For those in the audience and people at home, we'd like to thank you all for joining us. Tonight will be an important opportunity for you to hear directly from the police chief candidates. They'll be responding to questions that were compiled from questions submitted by the community. Thank you to those of you who submitted your questions. Candidates will not be providing an overview of their resume. Each person in the room has a copy of their bios, and if you're watching online, you can access their bios on the web. For more information about the process and the candidates, visit the City of Eugene website. You'll find more information about the police chief process under current news. We're now going to watch a short video before provided by the city manager, John Ruiz.
Hi, EPD team. As you know, we're in the process of hiring a new police chief, and I am looking forward to meeting our 3 finalists next week, as well as introducing them to you and into the community as well. Many of you have been involved so far in this process, which I really appreciate, and I am encouraging all of you to take the opportunity to meet the candidates and provide feedback to me directly. There will be a candidate meet and greet on Monday, March 12th from 14:45 to 15:45 in the Coquitlam classroom. Okay. I am particularly interested in several aspects of your feedback. One, their policing philosophy, their potential for building trust and engagement in the police department, as well as in the community, and their relevant work experience. I look forward to your continued participation and hearing your feedback. Please feel free to log online to provide that to me. I hope to have a final selection by March 23rd and sharing that good news with you.
Okay, I'm Sarah Maderi, and I'm going to talk just a little bit more about how this process is going to work. As we said, there is a website. The current news will get you there, and you'll be able to provide feedback if you're watching online at home. And you saw the deadline, 9 p.m. on March 17th, so if you're here in the audience and you leave and you need to do that, that'll work too. We're going to go through a series of questions. Each candidate will have about 2 minutes to answer each question, with the exception of the first one. And we'll shift back and forth between all 3 of you. There's timers out that'll be green, yellow, red, so this should be very familiar to you. We're not going to have a buzzer go off, but when it turns yellow, that's usually a good indicator you need to start thinking about stopping. If you go through the red light, one of us will probably correct that. The last thing I want to say is when we're having city councils and meetings in this room, one of the things that I've always really appreciated is that we set a tone of respect and safety for everybody here. That's the #1 thing. So as candidates are answering questions, we'll really appreciate and respect if you're not cheering or booing, and just respectfully listening so that the space is safe for everybody that's here. So with that, I think I will start with the first question. This is the first that you'll only have 1 minute to answer. So each of you, why Eugene? What have you learned or understand about this community that has you say Eugene?
So who goes first, Sarah?
Bruce, how about you?
Thank you very much. I get to go first. Why not Eugene? I've been asked that question when I was making my way through the audience here. For those of you who are not familiar with me, and I know you have my bios in front of you, yeah, I'm a West Coast guy. I was born and raised in San Francisco. I went to school right up the road, the University of Portland. I've been to Eugene a lot of times, and I like the city, very much like the city. I want to get back to Oregon. I want to get back to the West Coast. You have a fine community here, very eclectic community, a lot of free thinkers. I really like that. You're not stuck in a particular rut. You're a very accepting community. And you have a fine police department. And the police department is looking for good, strong leadership. And I think I can provide that leadership here in Eugene. And I think together, the police and the community can really make a difference in terms of quality of living here. So why not Eugene?
Nice. Let's move to you, Chris.
Thank you for that question. I want to come home, quite honestly. Oregon is home for me and my family. My wife is from Portland. My kids were born at Meridian Park Hospital up in Tualatin. I spent a large part of my career in the Willamette Valley, went to school at Western Oregon State College, spent time at Benton County Sheriff's Office. I'm familiar with this area and just love the Willamette Valley. Love what this area has to offer. And Eugene, quite frankly, is one of the most unique opportunities that exists in the state of Oregon to be the chief of police. And I've been keeping an eye on this opening for a while, understood when Pete was going to retire, and have been doing my homework and have visited several times since Pete announced his retirement in an effort to better understand this community. I love the inclusiveness and the tolerance this community has. I love that those are the values that I want to teach my kids. And so when I think about where I want to raise my kids, I want to be in a community that espouses those things.
Thank you, Chris. Mike.
Thank you. Yeah, it's kind of the same echo for me. I was born in Eastern Oregon. I went to high school in Hermiston. I worked for LeGrand PD prior to moving to the city of Vancouver, where I've spent the last 26 years. I've always loved Oregon. As a kid, big Ducks fan, still am a big Ducks fan. I come up here for the weekends in the fall to enjoy those games. I love the inclusiveness of this city. I think the city leadership is strong. The department members that I've met, you have a great police department in this community. For me, I would love the opportunity to be involved with the department and the community, to learn more about the community in a whole. Where I'm from in Vancouver, we're about 2 hours away from Eugene. It's still close to home. I've been in the Pacific Northwest pretty much my entire life, except for 3 years in Texas when I was serving in the military. So again, I have one daughter still left in school. She'll finish her last 2 years here. So as chief, I look forward to the opportunity of working with the community.
All right. That's a great start. What we're going to do from this point forward is we have 4 pre-selected questions. We'll work through those, and then there'll be an opportunity for you to submit questions, and we'll be pulling those forward as well. So Phil's going to kick us off with that.
Thank you, Sarah. Question 2, and we'll start with Chris. What will you do to address concerns about community, neighborhood, and traffic safety? How will you identify the top priorities, address budget concerns, and hire the best candidates to fill open positions?
All in 2 minutes, huh, Phil? Okay.
All in 2 minutes, yes.
All right.
Entire 2 minutes.
Yeah. Part of how we accomplish that is through communication. I firmly believe, as a leader of any organization, and particularly this organization, is that the community helps drive the police department's strategic initiative. It doesn't do me any good to build a police department and then ask you as a community to adhere to who I think we should be as an organization. It works the other way around. Engaging you in dialogue, identifying those key partnerships, we together get to identify the strategic direction of this police department and what we want to be. That way it becomes your police department, one that you are familiar with and one that you recognize on a daily basis. So those engagements are really, really important. I think this community drives that, and that level of importance, or the important aspects of that strategy. They drive that, whether it be through dialogue or through surveys. That's really important for me to be able to do that. I've often found, as chief of my organization now for the last 7 years, that those types of conversations are crucial, and it helps us identify who we want to be, which also helps us identify what type of people we want to recruit. You've heard over and over for answers from me throughout yesterday and today that I believe the foundation of being a just and reliable organization is hiring the right people. And recruiting the right people. But more importantly than recruiting the right people, because that's kind of the easy part, is to put together a recruiting strategy, is to how do you retain the right people in your organization? How do you get them here but then keep them engaged, keep them feeling relevant in this community so that you get to know them over a long period of time as being your police officers in your communities and in your neighborhoods and in your business districts. So it's a strong effort for recruitment, but maybe even a higher and stronger effort to retain those really good people that you can call your police department.
Go to Mike.
To echo the thoughts of my colleague, I agree with that 100%. I would add, as a leader of the organization and as for the community, I think that the department represents the community, should represent the community. It's a community engagement that really drives our philosophy, how we operate, how we engage the community to address societal issues, to address any other issue. It takes a community, a family, to really get through those processes. There's a lot of societal issues that we deal with in law enforcement outside of really the respond to a call where an officer is needed, as I say, with a gun and a badge. So we really need to look how we use the resources that we have, how can we effectively address the livability issues within the community, and really operate as a one family. This is a very unique community, very engaged from the interactions that I've had to this point. It's a very caring community, and that, to me, that's very special. It's a special environment to be in. And I think, again, there's great leadership within the city leadership team, and there's great men and women within the Eugene Police Department. And for me, I'm looking forward to having that next role. And really, my philosophy coming in is, how do I make this agency better from the first day that I start till the day that I leave? That end in mind. Have I established those rising stars, those new leaders within the agency to address the community and keep moving in a positive direction with good policies, good training? Our men and women deserve good training along with the good recruiting and retention that you need to have a strong organization. But what is that training that we're providing, that leadership training that we provide for everybody? So, and when I leave, the future leaders can keep leading with a strong department, with strong directives, and really a strong mission moving forward.
Thank you. Bruce?
I'm trying to remember the question. No, I'm kidding, but you mentioned a few things. You mentioned budget. You mentioned traffic enforcement. A lot of different things in the question. I'm going to challenge the community on that question, and perhaps other questions also. I believe in strategic planning, and when we're talking about budgeting, we're talking about the resource allocation. And when we're talking about problems with traffic, we're talking about, these are things that's a thing, and perhaps others that the community has brought forward to the police department. So as we strategically plan in the police department, we have to know where we're going, what resources we have available in order to do the job, whether it's a staffing issue, or whether it's equipment issue, regardless of the issue, whether it's where we allocate those resources. I think it all starts with a plan. I think we have to have goals and objectives, and I'm a firm believer in that. So what I've done in the past as a chief of police is I've held strategic planning sessions, annual strategic planning sessions. It not only involved key staff members of the police department, but also members of the community. We shouldn't be, as a police department or any service provider, trying to outguess the community in what your needs are. I think you have to come forward at some point, and you have to assist us, regardless of whether it's the police, the fire, public works. Doesn't matter. And so in my way of doing things as a chief of police is I typically invite members of the public and key members of the public as we're going through the strategic planning process. So that's how we would address certain issues like the budget and traffic issues and those sort of things. It's an inclusive process. We want everybody to be involved. It's your community.
Thank you, Bruce.
All right, next question. We're going to start with Mike and loop around in the same direction. What major national police event in the last 15 years was the most compelling for you in terms of what you've learned from it? What about that event left the biggest impression with you, and how will you utilize that in running the Eugene Police Department?
I think probably the biggest event, and it's more recent than that, is I would go back to the Ferguson event. I sat through a debrief recently on Ferguson, and up until that time, I hadn't really understood all the dynamics in that. And it wasn't just the use of force event that occurred, but getting to the underlying issues within Ferguson. It had been something that had been going on within that community for decades, and part of it was how the systems were set up in that general area. Their police department in their city ran solely off of revenues from citations and arrests. The community had 10,000 more active warrants than community members from that activity, and really the way the processes in the system was set up, that's what drove the officers' culture and the direction and how they interacted with the community, and it built very walls to get over as a community. And so members were afraid to ask for law enforcement assistance. They were afraid to engage in law enforcement because they didn't want to go to jail. They didn't want a family member to go to jail because you could be arrested for any violation. For going 5 over the speed limit, you could be arrested. That's how the laws were set up and the system was set up. So really having a better understanding of a culture and how the community feels about law enforcement, really the impact that I took away from that is really we need to be inclusive. We need to treat everyone with respect. We don't build our systems based on revenue through enforcement action. Community engagement is what we should be doing. We spend 90% of our time in law enforcement now engaging in the community. We spend about 10% responding to calls for service. So as a chief, I want to keep that engagement and really drive that community policing philosophy that we're out meeting with the community, understanding the community, and learning their concerns and interacting and solving the problems together. That would be the biggest event that I've taken back in most recent times.
Thank you. We'll come around to you, Bruce.
Okay. Yeah, Mike brought up the Ferguson incident. I think the Ferguson incident was a tipping point. It wasn't a starting point. It was a tipping point of events that led to where we are in policing today. I have to, and I do take a little bit different stand on that because, you know, the question was raised by 3 young ladies on a forum just prior to this. You know, I think it was them about the Black Lives Matter. What do we think about that? Okay, and I'm a black man in the United States, and you know, excuse me. My parents, particularly my mother, came from a very segregated part of this country. And, you know, even when we went down to Louisiana as kids, you know, we had to go. Sorry, just memories. To the back of restaurants to eat. Okay? And so there's a history here between the police and at least the African American community and other communities and the police. And so what happened in Ferguson, that is the significant event. It is a tipping point, okay? The problem there is we espouse community policing. And as a result of that incident, the president came out with 21st century policing. If there had been community policing in that community, if that chief would have stepped out and done the right thing and respected those people, that would have never happened. Period. Sorry.
Thank you, Bruce. Thank you. Chris?
So I'll go a little bit of a different direction because I think both my colleagues are very, very well spoken on the issue of race relations and having Ferguson be the tipping point. Mine's going to be a accumulation of a lot of events that have occurred over the last 15 years and trying to keep our kids safe in school. I can remember, and it's a little bit past 15 years, but I can remember having a marked difference after 1999 when Columbine happened about what it was the police's role was in helping to keep our kids safe, and we trained our butts off to try and do that. And we are averaging we're averaging a shooting in a school about one a month since then, which is crazy to me that we're still there. It's not just a police problem. It's a school preparedness problem. It's a problem that the schools have continued to and are doing a better job of taking seriously on all hazard preparedness and being prepared to harden those targets for our kids. It's us working together as a community, but maybe more importantly, in every single one of those incidents of violence in our schools, the hindsight bias is 20/20. It's amazing, the hindsight bias, because in every single one of those situations, there was somebody that came out and said, you know what, I saw something, or I knew something, or I thought something was up with that kid, and they never said a word about it. So this whole campaign about see something, say something, I think is really, really important. I think society owns a piece of the violence that's happening in school because we choose to sit quietly, and we choose not to say anything. And I think it's important that we take some ownership on that. It's important that the families with kids in schools take some ownership on that. Not be so worried about the stigma or the reputation of saying something about what they see and allow us to do our job to vet that information. I think it's really, really important we pay attention to how we can protect our kids in school.
Thank you. I'll check in on you. Do you need a sip of water? You good? Okay.
Thank you very much. Moving on to question number 4. The question is, please describe your experience working with marginalized communities, racial, ethnic, LGBTQ, etc. What approaches have you used in developing programs or policies to support these communities? And I believe we are starting with Bruce.
Every community I've worked with and been involved with as a chief of police has been a very diverse community. I was the chief of police for fourth largest school district in the United States, Houston, 205,000 students, 30,000 employees, and 80% of the student body were kids, inner city kids. They were black and Latino and Hispanic. A lot of them came from broken homes. We had homes where grandparents were raising the kids. Bad environments in a lot of cases. When I was chief up in Hartford, again, it was a city at the time with 110,000 people, and about 75% was of people of color, and these were poor people. Hartford was a very poor city at the time, and I think it still is today. Excuse me. In Norfolk is, again, when you talk about marginalized communities, 44% black, 44% white, and the other 12% mostly was Latino, and it was an emerging Latino community. So my mandate, if you will, as a chief of police in those 3 departments was to work with those communities, and we had to work. These were very difficult communities to work with. Now, somebody asked me, and I only have a few seconds left, well, gee, Bruce, you won't have that here in Eugene. Most of the community, 85% or more, is Anglo, but that still doesn't mean that we don't have problems here, and we have marginalization here. We have homeless, we have mentally ill, we have poor people, we have crime, and so I have a long history of working very successfully in marginalized communities. Thank you very much, Bruce. Yeah. Chris?
Sure. So I think it's important for a police department as they get engaged in this community to identify entry points in young people's lives and in youth's lives to be able to make a difference. I mean, we talk an awful lot about at-risk youth, and we can go round and around about what that definition means to be at risk, but at risk has a broad definition depending on what your perspective is. In some respects, at risk might be just because of the color of your skin, and in other cases it might be because of because you're an economic refugee in this community and you're just trying to survive and you're engaging in survival techniques just to be able to survive. Some of the things that I've had a chance to experience that have been very, very successful has been mostly with the Latino population. When I was in Hillsborough, about 37% of that community was Latino, and some of the stuff that we engaged in that organization that I actually had the privilege of being a part of is taking a strong stance on truancy and understanding that keeping kids in school is how you can build a generation of kids that don't engage in criminal behavior, and holding parents accountable for getting their kids in school. So that's one program that I think is really, really important. The other piece is, like, during the summers, we had migrant camps for kids. We had summer camps for kids that largely were by themselves because their parents were working so hard to try to make ends meet. And so I think the police department has a role to play in all of this. I think it does a couple of things. First of all, it gives kids an opportunity to connect with us, but it also gives kids the services that they need that maybe they're not getting at home. The family structure sometimes is not in a place to be able to adequately support the needs of our adolescent kids. I got to tell you, it's a full-time job raising a 10 and 8-year-old. I can't imagine some of the challenges people have, and I'm blessed. I can't imagine the challenges some people have. But I think the police department has a role to play in that and needs to take some responsibility in helping to bring those kinds of services to those kids.
Thank you very much, Chris. Mike?
Thank you. From my perspective, the last 26 years working with the City of Vancouver, I've had the opportunity to work up through the ranks, and the last 6.5 years working as the Assistant Chief. From my perspective, I've had a chance to engage the community, really get insight on concerns and how they view things, and how they see things through their perspective. And so for me, I've been able to work with our staff putting together solid industry best practice racial profiling policies to guide our staff, how to deal with homelessness, mental illness as well. We get engaged as far as an agency with PAL and other community events to engage the diversity in our community, to bring the young youth in. I think it starts there, really educating them on law enforcement as a general profession, because it is a profession. There's a lot of education and training that goes in it, a lot of professional men and women. And I think we have to really train our folks to be professionals. It's not just a job, so there's a lot of investment in that. As an assistant chief, we have a chief's diversity committee that meets once a month, and we moved it to the lunchtime, provide a free lunch. We get a lot of involvement from the community that wants to come in with that. It gives them something to do for lunch, and of course everybody likes a free lunch. So we set it up, and it started about 10 years ago, but we are able to engage with the diversity within our department. We have representation from our members, from other city departments. We have membership from within the community, from faith-based, from social services, from all the diverse community representation within our community. And that gives us a chance once a month to really sit down, discuss what's going on within the community, talk about practices, get information on their events, and be able to go out as an organization and attend those events.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So this is the last of the pre-selected questions, and you may have started to notice a theme in Eugene that sometimes we say we have a question for you and we tuck 2 or 3 into one. So this is going to be one of those questions. It's a question with 2 parts. How will you balance protecting the human rights of people experiencing homelessness, mental illness, and poverty with protecting the property rights and public space access and security of other residents of Eugene? Second part of that, what is your experience with crisis intervention training? And what would be your approach to continuing ongoing training here in Eugene? So they're kind of connected but separate. Mm-hmm. And we're going to start, I think, this time with Chris.
Yeah, so I get to go first twice now, so that's my privilege. That's a delicate balance. I will tell you, when I came and did some homework, I had a great conversation with Brittany Quick Warner of the Chamber of Commerce, and we had this discussion about the downtown business core and some of the struggles that we're having between business owners and some of the unhoused population that are down there, and how that is a delicate balance between the two, and how oftentimes the police department is asked to help mediate that problem. So that's really a difficult one to do. The thing that I would say is that we are not going to police our way out of this problem, and we're certainly not going to jail our way out of this problem. There are certain behaviors that we have to address from a police perspective, but there's an awful lot of behaviors that can't be addressed through policing, and that we have to find a collaborative effort. And if you're looking for a chief of police to show up someday or show up in this process and have all the answers to this problem, you're not going to find it. And if you have somebody that tells you they have all the answers, they're not your candidate. Their candidate is the one that can build coalitions and be able to solve this problem collectively and together. Shelter resources are horribly in need in this community, horribly in need, and it might be time to be talking about some public investment in that, and not just nonprofit or private investment on how we get shelter services to those that are in need. So that's a real challenge we have to face. CIT training is something that all three of us have had. I guarantee you that it's state mandated. I think it can go beyond that. I think there's some great opportunities to talk about crisis intervention training, tactical communications, mediation training, so that all those officers are trained to be able to do any one of those things as they deal with issues in our community. And then I think instead of making it just a run-of-the-mill mandated training, you fold it into your scenario-based training, so they're actually practicing the competencies on a monthly or quarterly basis, so they can get really good at those.
Thank you, Chris. Over to Mike.
Thank you. I will echo the same thoughts from my colleague. I mean, he touched on it, and I agree wholeheartedly. Homelessness, it's a societal issue that we all need to be part of to deal with. The homelessness, the mental health illness, the drug addiction, to balance those needs within the community. It takes a conversation. It takes everybody working together. In my experience dealing with homelessness, and as Chris mentioned, we're not going to arrest our way out of it. And I look at it as, while the police have a part in the homelessness issue, it's a community-wide issue. It's a citywide issue, from the nonprofits to the faith base. And I would agree as well in some of my assessments. There are some good things going on with the Cahoots program and others. I would love to see more funding to enrich that piece into the community. I think they do a great job. My ride-along last night, I think there were 7 calls holding for Cahoots and 3 or 4 for 911 for officers to respond to. So again, homelessness, and I'll say something similar, if you can find somebody that has all the answers, I want to talk to him, because I read articles all the time. I look at other communities. I attended the PERF conference about a month and a half ago, which is the Police Research Foundation. And we had communities, law enforcement from all over the country talking about homelessness, as far as New York, all up and down the West Coast. There's a lot of good ideas going on, but it's resource generated. And you can only do as much as your community and the resources that you have as an agency that deal with that. CIT is the same thing. Our officers are all trained. I agree with that. Training 40 hours, should be trained at the academy as well. Ongoing yearly training with CIT, de-escalation, ICAT training. There's a lot of models out there, but it's having the training for our officers to be able to interact and deal with those emotional issues that are going on, and to be able to take a step back and address it in a calm fashion.
Yeah, I'll start with the CIT training, because I really don't have too much more to add besides what you've already heard from Mike and Chris. That's largely a training issue, how we interact with the community, But let's go to the homelessness part of this, and trying to balance between the dignity and respect of those homeless folks, and then the expectations of business owners and those sort of things. This is a unique community, and that it has, to a large degree, accepted the homelessness. And when we're talking about treating people with dignity and respect, which is one of the pillars of 21st century policing, and is certainly part of what we need to be doing in our community policing philosophy. I agree with Chris and with Mike. It is a societal issue, but it's not unique to Eugene. Okay, and so while you may experience it here in Eugene, I come from San Francisco. It has a huge homeless problem, and there are other cities. I lived in Hawaii when I was in the service. Even back then, they had a huge homeless problem. So it's not unique to Eugene, and all of these cities, regardless of where they are grappling with the homeless issue. Okay, but the bigger question is, why do we have the issue in the first place? You know, what can we do as a country, the world's most powerful and richest country? Why do we have this issue? You know, and how can our government leaders, they need to tackle this, not only our local leaders, but our government leaders. But we have to respect the business owners, and if we, you know, and we just need to make sure that the homeless are aware of city ordinances and not engage in criminal activity.
A quick process check. If you have questions and you are writing them down on your card, we ask that you just send them to the back of the room, and we're going to start into those. Before you start sending them to the back of the room, I understand we've received about 6 about lethal force, and we're going to try to combine those into the right questions. So we'll start with 1.
Thank you. So, yes, we received about 6 questions about the use of force, so we compiled it the best we could. We're going to go ahead and start with Mike this time. So when there is a crisis situation, such as an officer-involved shooting or overuse of force, the community and the Eugene Police Department can end up at odds. What have you done or can imagine doing to reduce the them against us attitude, which is so destructive here in Eugene?
It's been my experience, and it's my leadership philosophy dealing with OIS incidents. They are very traumatic, and it's for the officer and for the community as well. But I'll go back to that relationship building. And my philosophy with leadership is not a position, it's about relationships. And if you're out doing the right things from the officer on the street all the way up through the ranks and through command and from the chief's office, if you're out engaging the community and building, and I call it a bank, you're getting those great deposits of community interaction and engagement and understanding where their perspectives are and where their lenses are within the community, and you're building those deposits. When you have to make a withdrawal on something sensitive like that, I would hope that it gives us an opportunity as a community and as an agency to take that pause, to gather the information that has occurred around that incident, and then because of that relationship building, we should be able to sit down and have a discussion from the police department's perspective with the community and explain and answer questions of what occurred. There were tragic events, and I've held many of them. I've had to go and deal with those in the last 6 years as an assistant chief with the city of Vancouver. So I understand the importance of just that engagement and being able to answer those questions to the community, but being able to take that pause so we can have that conversation.
Thank you, Mike. Bruce?
Well, I think it certainly starts with the chief of police. We set the stage for how our departments are going to act or react to any situation. And not only the chief's philosophy, how the chief goes about leading the police department, but let's also look at training. A police department is only as good as its leadership, and it's only as good as its training. And you have to ensure that there is proper training there to try to prevent, before these things happen, to try to prevent these sort of incidences from happening. Okay, and again, that goes to training, you know, and sometimes you have to, let me just tell you what I did. You know, we had a lot of instances of perhaps those kind of shootings in Norfolk, and so what I did is I said, look, this enough of this, And so I provided the officers, the first department in Virginia to provide the officers with tasers. You know, it's one of those less than lethal tools that we have there. And not just a taser, you know, because we didn't want them just to use the taser just because it was available, but we made sure that the tasers had recording devices, both audio and visual. And you would be surprised at how, in proper training, how a lot of those incidents diminished over a very short period of time.
Thank you, Bruce. Chris?
So on June 5th of 2011, I had just become the chief of police in Richland. I'd been there for 5 days, and I was actually down here in Oregon in Sherwood going to church with my family when I got a phone call that the Richland Police Department just used lethal force on an individual and fired 23 rounds and killed an individual after a car stop. I'm in Sherwood trying to deal with this in the 5th day on the job. Quickly, I got back up there because I knew that it was a tremendous opportunity to bring the police department and this community together surrounding a really critical incident. One of the things that I think that we as law enforcement professionals don't do very well is communicate in those situations. How many times have you heard in a situation like that where there's a tough question answered that the answer that you get is, well, it's still under investigation? I think there's opportunity to share information with the community about those traumatic and lethal encounters that do not jeopardize the investigation and do not jeopardize the privacy of the officer or the victim or the suspect in this case that was killed. But I do think that we miss opportunities to communicate openly with our community about what's happened. I think that fosters trust, that builds trust, that shows an open and honest and transparent organization. And so I supremely believe that we miss opportunities, and I like taking advantage of opportunities to share information when I can about those incidents.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. All right. We've got the important job of sorting through these.
Sure.
So we're going to stay on this track just a little bit. The next question has to do with the whole concept of militarizing police forces. So how do you feel about the military hardware that is increasingly being made available to police departments? What are the benefits and downsides, and how would you respond to offers for more? Does that say what it says, more or move? I think it said more. Just basic concept about that. And I think we're starting with Bruce.
I'll answer the question. I think that's somewhat of a misnomer. I think the officers have the right to be protected, okay? And what I mean by that is body armor, okay? And so if that's a form of militarizing police, I would have to disagree with that. We want the officers to be just as safe as anyone in the community. You know, it's a tough job as it is. We have to give them the tools to do their job. I think this is another item that has come up as a result of the Ferguson incident that took place, the tragic Ferguson incident in which, you know, the chief had snipers up on the roofs and all this. He's supposed to be protecting the community, you know, not threatening the community with snipers and those sort of things. And then you see some of the other nomenclature that they use there. But certainly we have to give the officers the proper tools so that they can protect themselves in this very tough and dangerous job also. And if things like body armor and Kevlar helmets, I don't see that as militarizing the police. I see that as safety items for the police. And I think most of you would understand that and do understand that. Sure, some police departments, do you need armored vehicles in every instance in every department? No. And I won't go into history on that because I have certainly disagreed with those kind of things, depending on the agency. But by and large, I'm looking at the safety aspects for the police officers out there.
Thank you. Chris?
I lost track of who's supposed to go when, so that's
we're keeping track of it for you.
Okay, you're awesome. So.
Yeah.
Well, I'll be my experience. You know, I've been doing this for 27 years, and I got to tell you, most of the stuff that has been made available to us is just junk. it's, you know, as a police department, you have a tendency to want to try to take advantage of your available resources as a way to relieve your budget, and so sometimes that equipment's made available to you, but it's kind of a be careful what you wish for type of thing. Usually it's outdated, and it comes with a whole lot more maintenance than it's worth in some respects. So I've been a part of police departments that have chosen not to take advantage of that program, even though I know it exists. I would say that there are certain technological advances in the uniforms and the load-bearing vest or the external vest carriers for us that we have moved to in law enforcement that do look more militarized, but I would submit that there is an ergonomic advantage to that makes our officers safer, but much more effective. I went through a period of time in my law enforcement career where both my handcuffs that I carried on my belt were in the small of my back. And anytime I can get the weight out from around an officer's waist and on their shoulders where they can carry that, it cuts down on the injuries, it cuts down on time loss, it cuts down on all sorts of things that have a collateral benefit in our community because we don't have officers dealing with some of those physical limitations. And so I really look at it as an ergonomic issue more than I do anything else.
Thank you. Mike.
Thank you. So just adding a little bit more from my colleagues, as far as the Kevlar helmet, body armor, the load-bearing vests, yeah, I have the same agreements and observations. One, it helps the officer safety. It protects them out in the field in a critical incident. The studies show that the load-bearing vests help alleviate injuries, prolongs the officer career. I can speak from personal experience after almost doing this for 29 years and wearing that equipment. I recently had back surgery to clean up my lower back last fall, so there is some benefits to that, and I believe part of that, it's what do those vests look like? How much gear do we have on it? Do we have the 3-foot knife sticking on the backside and clips that look like they're about 1 foot in length? So I think there's conversation from my perspective, in my view, of what do we put on those vests and how do we try to keep it professional. But I think there's certainly an importance to it. As far as the excess military equipment, I believe there's a need to that to some level, probably with the emergency operations team, the SWAT team, because there are some events that happen, unfortunately, that you do need that equipment, and it does alleviate cost on budget to purchase that your own. But I think there's a fine balance, and as the chief, I would look at what is Eugene using right now, what equipment, and really to take any more on or to accept more equipment, it would have to be a further conversation with staff and really what's needed and some community feedback as well with that.
Thank you.
Thank you all. So we also are a college town, as you know. Go Ducks, and we compile some of these questions as well. So what we wanted to ask you all, starting with Chris, what is your experience in college towns? What is your philosophy/strategy for working with university police and campus community members?
So thank you for that, and I think I need to just self-disclose that I'm a Beaver fan. I just feel compelled to tell you that before you make a decision about your next chief of police. The good news is I'm not very threatening as a Beaver fan right now. So I spent those 10 years in Corvallis at the sheriff's office. OSP had the contract on campus with policing the campus, but we helped the Corvallis Police Department. So the college town environment is really familiar to me. Maybe more importantly and more poignantly, part of my assignment when I was in Corvallis as a sergeant was I was assigned to the Oregon State football team for 3 years with Dennis Erickson. Went with them everywhere they went, and I got a unique perspective on having student athletes and the nuances of student athletes coming to your community. Oftentimes coming there as students, but it's a capital A for the athlete. Because they see that as a way to further their career. What a tremendous experience being able to, as freshmen when they come in, have that conversation with them that went something like that, went something like this to my male athletes. When she says no, it means no. and being able to set the tone for the way they're going to behave and the expectations we have for them on how they're going to behave on campus. So I've got a pretty strong sense of what it's like to be in a college town, and a strong collaborative spirit with the local police department that's doing that, and specifically with our student athletes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mike?
Mike.
Thank you. Go Ducks. I'm a big Ducks fan, so I got that going for me. This Beaver fan over here. So really, I guess in my early years in law enforcement, I did work for the Grand PD for about 3.5 years, and so we had Eastern Oregon University there. They didn't have their own police force enforcing that, so as a community and as a police department, we would work with their administration, of course dealing with the typical smaller university size, of course, the parties, the alcohol, and so it's and really the sex crimes that go along with it. There's a lot of sexual violence on college campuses, and unfortunately, it's very underreported, as any sexual assault is, because people are afraid to come forward. It's embarrassing, and we could talk about that for hours as far as some of the other particulars to that. So really working with their administration as a young officer, and I didn't do it as an admin person, but just understanding that and really enforcing the liquor laws in general. With the city of Vancouver, we do have WSU, but there is no college campus as far as dorms, so we're not dealing with that. We have Clark College, but really I find within the educational community is really having those partnerships and being able to support each other, discuss resources, really what's occurring, and to provide that thought and really to address community or campus concerns. It really takes a concerted effort between the university administration and police and the local police. So that's would be my practice, is really keeping those open lines of communication and working together.
Thank you, Mike. Bruce?
Well, I'm not going to get between the Ducks and the Beavers here, okay? I'll just tell you that one of the reasons why I came down to Eugene was to watch my poor little Portland Pilots, University of Portland Pilots, come down and get beat up in basketball by the Ducks and the Beavers, okay? So, but I will tell you that I work directly with two universities in Norfolk. We had Old Dominion University with a student population of about 20,000, and we had Norfolk State University, which is a historically black college and university, which had a student body population of 8,000. Both of those had police departments, and I want to take this one step further because we also have the world's largest Navy base. So not only did I collaborate with the universities on a regular basis, we provided training, we provided equipment for them, okay, and we provided resources whenever they would have a large event and they needed more resources their police departments couldn't handle. But we also assisted the Navy police in a lot of their investigations, etc. So I have a lot of experience working with not only in the college town, don't get me wrong, but you know, we had student population almost 30,000 in Norfolk, and we had, again, world's largest Navy base, which means a lot of military personnel there. We had the UN, I'm sorry, NATO, not the UN, but NATO in Norfolk also. A lot of people aren't aware of that. We had to work with all of those. So collaborative effort, teamwork, make our community safer.
Thank you.
All right. My understanding is we're going to go 5 to 10 minutes longer because we started a little bit late. And one of our jobs as moderators is try to get all of your questions in. I'm a little bit of a lumper, so I'm going to go out on a limb and kind of put a couple of things together. There appears to be, from the number of questions, a little bit of concern, maybe from a community perspective, that as policies are shifting and changing, like to address some of the use of force, that maybe there's some resistance in the police department, and how would you lead and hold people accountable? And at the same time, there's questions that say, how do you build trust in the department so that they're united and they have good morale? Like, how do you balance the building trust in the department and also holding them accountable to start changing policies moving forward?
I think it starts with the leadership of the department, quite frankly, you know. I've had success in that. I've taken over some extremely difficult departments with Norfolk and In Hartford, extremely difficult. You know, we weren't meeting the needs of the community. The departments weren't doing their job as they should have been. And I think it starts with the individual that sits in the big seat, and that's the chief of police, and the chief of police, and the philosophy that comes from the chief of police, and to make sure that everyone is aware of that philosophy, that they're trained to that philosophy, and that philosophy is, quite frankly, enforced. You can't have a splintered police department. If you do, then you're going to have these issues. I think most organizations, I don't know of any organizations that do not want and do not appreciate strong, transparent, open, and honest leadership that sets directions. Okay? And that even includes discipline, as no one likes to be disciplined, but sometimes it is necessary. And that's what you have to do as the chief of police, you know. And so I've been very successful at that, you know. Not to single out anyone in this room, but, you know, we have union representation in this room, police union representation. I will be meeting with them tomorrow, but some of that representation's already heard some of my philosophy, and I'll be answering their questions and their concerns. But, you know, I've been very good at coalescing these departments and getting them to do what they're supposed to do in terms of benefiting the community, the people that we serve.
So I think it's an opportunity to change the vernacular on use of force. In my organization now, we call it response to resistance. I think it's time to take a look at this from a different perspective and a different lens. I think it's important that an organization captures all of those incidents that occur and define what is going to be considered a response to resistance, down to behaviors that are perceived by whoever you're encountering as behaviors that would change their behavior. The important piece of that is, I think, the byproduct of that is creating an opportunity for early warning system in the event you have officers that are showing higher levels of force or more frequency of force or response to resistance than others. We could save careers if we would just pay attention and do the analytics on this thing and have the tough conversations with people. I do honestly believe that. The leadership within the organization, and all three of us have got a strong leadership style. My leadership style is very relational, but the piece that I think is so important in a police department is to create relevance, to create a sense of relevance for them in the community, that they're making a difference. It's easy to feel irrelevant when you're in an organization or in a policing profession where you respond to the same call over and over and to the same person over and over again. It doesn't feel like you make a difference. You've got to create an atmosphere of relevance and help them understand how important they are to the economic engine of the city.
Thank you. To address the use of force, I agree with my colleagues. I would add that use of force, we need to be tracking use of force, and as Chris mentioned, my experience has been we track all use of forces. They're reviewed through the chain of command up through my lieutenants and commanders. They then go to training, and training reviews each one of those use of force as well to identify patterns, early warnings, what can we do differently. I mean, we should be looking as an organization dealing with the use of force is really that de-escalation and that training, and what are the tools out there that are available for our staff and for the departments to re-engage, think of different ways to approach it. But there's ICAT training, there's de-escalation training. It goes back to just communication skills, so we're not into those situations where we have to use force. So really, as a chief, I think it's important to always be looking at different opportunities to learn, make sure we're tracking what's going on and identifying any trends and providing that training to our staff. And as far as leadership, I mean, it does start from the top and it resonates through the agency. And I think to build trust within the organization is you have to hold everybody accountable at the same standards. You have to be transparent in your conversations and decision making. And really what's most important is that inclusion and allowing the members to be heard, but making them feel that their voice does matter. And you have to be willing to have those candid conversations and communicate.
All right, thank you all. So this is the final question, and for this one, we're going to just reduce it to 1.5 minutes. It is a very important question, so here it goes. Are you familiar with the Protections for Individuals Ordinance? What are your thoughts in coordinating with immigration and customs enforcement?
Is it me
I think
again?
Chris is first
You're
again.
giving me that look.
Chris.
I feel like Bruce went first last time.
Okay, I'm happy to do that. So there's been a couple of things in my career recently that I've planted my flag in the ground on, and you've heard me talk about this if you've been in panels. One of them is how we're going to engage as an organization via social media, and the fact that we were not going to take people in crisis or their unfortunate circumstances as a way to further our initiative in social media to gain followers on Facebook. Creating a reality TV show out of people's unfortunate circumstances is not going to happen in this organization. The second one is that I planted my flag firmly in the ground and came out publicly in the media in Richland about how the Richland Police Department will not engage in immigration enforcement. The only piece of that we will own is if, in the event that the federal government is in town doing some lawful activities that the federal government should be doing, not local law enforcement, and there's an officer safety risk, we're happy to lend support to make sure that they're safe while doing what they're doing. But there will not be local resources utilized for immigration enforcement. And I'm not sure I can put it any more plainly than that. And that's a philosophy I have. That's a philosophy that was built into me in Hillsborough when I went there shortly after 9/11 when we had this conversation, and my minority community up there was concerned about that. It underreports victimization when you do things like that. I think it's a horrible practice for civilian law enforcement to be engaging in immigration enforcement. And we had the conversation again after the 2016 election, and it's unfortunate we have to say that, but that's my stance.
Thank you, Chris. Mike?
Yes, thank you. No, I have the same stance. I have reviewed the policy and document. I concur, would not engage Eugene Police Department, any resource in enforcement of immigration laws for immigration purposes under the federal stance. I do realize that there are some times that we will have to engage. If there's a felony arrest warrant for a felony crime, for a legitimate crime, yes, we will arrest those folks, whether you're a legal citizen or not, if there's a felony crime that needs to be addressed or a felony warrant. Other than that, there will not be arrest or engagement in enforcement for immigration rules, laws, or regulations. So for my agency, we have the same stance as well in Vancouver. We have policy on that. We're clear with our staff. I would be clear here and make sure our policy is reflective of that. And really, from reading that document and some of the research that I did, that is from the community, it's from your leadership, it's from your mayor and council, it's what the community wants. I am 110 in support of that, and that would be my stance on that. Absolutely no enforcement.
Thank you, Mike. Bruce?
Yeah, I'm going to be short and sweet on that. We're not going to enforce it. That's period. Not with me as chief of police. That was presented to us many years ago by ICE down in Hampton Roads, and as a collective, the chiefs of police down there, and I was the chairman of the Hampton Roads Police Chiefs Association. We said no, and it'll be no here also. You know, we're just not going to get involved in that. You know, people have if they come here, we're going to provide the same services to whoever lives in this city, and we're going to provide those services. And we're going to treat those people with respect and dignity. Period. And that's all there is. If they break the law, we're going to treat them the same as anyone else that breaks the law. You know, but whether that gets reported to immigration or ICE or whoever it is, it won't necessarily come from us. So no, we're not going to do that. Period.
Thank you.
All right. Well, one of the greatest gifts of living in Eugene and serving Eugene is our engaged community. And I want to thank you all for coming out tonight and participating in this event. And I want to thank the three of you for your very thoughtful, vulnerable, honest answers. And hope that the rest of your week is good. I'd also like to thank LaDonna for the interpretation. It's been amazing without a break. Thank you.
Welcome.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, folks.